Shalom, my friends. This is Rabbi Sol Solomon with a Rabbinical Reflection for the end of the year 2023. What a joyful and encouraging year it's been, huh? A terrific celebration of peace and love and reason and decency. And if you believe that, you must not have the internet or any access to the outside world, which has been steeped in anxiety and hatred, mostly with good reason. COVID is still here. Remember COVID? The virus that killed a zillion old people and is now a common cold? Only it's so common, everyone's still getting it. Almost 4 years after the disease erupted, many of us are still wearing masks everywhere. Granted, some people are such meeskites. A mask is an improvement, a public service even, but still, how many variants can one illness have? Someday, they're going to be able to trace all the way back, and they will learn that COVID is just another strain of caveman breathing disorder. And speaking of cavemen, Donald Trump is running for president again. Look, he wasn't a bad POTUS. He was great for Israel and the economy, but he's also old and nuts. That's a combination you put in assisted living, not in the Oval Office. Meanwhile, Trump's opponent is Joe Biden, who's so old when he got his driver's license, he just had to learn 2 words, giddy up and whoa. I did not make that joke up, but I also couldn't make up that the combined age of the 2 presumed 2024 candidates is 158. I know age brings wisdom and experience, but it also brings senility and special underpants. Ronald Reagan was a powerhouse his first 4 years, but the last 2, he fumbled more than the New York Jets' O-line. Meanwhile, Trump might not even be allowed to run because state Supreme Courts, like the one in Colorado, are holding him accountable for the Capitol insurrection. He hasn't been convicted of that, by the way. Oh, sure, he'll get convicted of fraud and sexual harassment, but by gosh, the treason thing is still a mere accusation. As such, I think the Denver judges got ahead of themselves and hijacked an election decision that should be made by the voters, not the courts. Remember, the last time judges got involved in politics, they installed George W. Bush as commander-in-chief, which was like putting Rose from the Golden Girls in charge of NASA. So if Trump doesn't or can't run, we might get Ron DeSantis, who's slightly to the right of Mussolini and thinks gay people should be, ungay. Or there's Nikki Haley, who's like DeSantis, pro-Israel, but also believes fetuses are viable at the sperm stage. So, as ever, our choice for the highest office in the land will come down to least worst. I'd rather have Knobbelwurst. Meanwhile, in 2023, the Dow Jones set new highs, but so did global temperatures, housing prices, gas prices, and groceries. By the end of the year, inflation improved, which is just a euphemism for prices still rising, only less quickly. And the national debt is now $33 trillion. I mean, can't we ask Taylor Swift as a favor to pay it off? Nearing its 2nd year is the Ukraine war, a fierce battle between Russia and more Russians. Ukraine's president keeps thanking us for all our money and weapons, but no, thank you, Vladimir Zelensky, for keeping our military-industrial complex chugging along. Maybe you can also beg a bunch of Chevys and Toyotas and help us bring Detroit back. As for Russia, we all thought Vladimir Putin would be dead by now. Instead, he's just deathly, pale and shaky with purple streaks on the tops of his hands. The CIA speculates those are either intravenous marks or he's been fisting the California raisins. Speaking of good taste, the Hollywood studios finally came to their senses and settled with the Writers Guild. They realized that having artificial intelligence write boring screenplays with lame dialogue, cliched plots, and obvious themes was no substitute for having real writers churn out scripts with lame dialogue, incoherent plots, and woke propaganda. The only movies that weren't bombs were Oppenheimer, about a bomb, and Barbie, about a bombshell. But hey, where's the A-bomb when you need it? On October 7th, Hamas fired hundreds of rockets from Gaza into mainland Israel. Arab gunmen also stormed an Israeli music festival where they massacred 300 attendees, tortured others, and took hostages. They also raped a bunch of women, many of whom were later found dead. It's unclear whether the women were violated before or after they were killed because, let's face it, Muslim terrorists aren't the pickiest bunch when it comes to pussy. They see a woman with an uncovered thumb, they're like, what a whore! When the first wave of horror was over, 1,400 Israelis lay dead. I have no jokes for that. 1,400 slaughtered in a day by the same batch of people who have poisoned the world for 70 years with their fundamentalism, despotism, and terrorism. And so, a day later, Bibi Netanyahu says to the Palestinians in Gaza, pack your shit, you have 24 hours, get the fuck out. And the world, which had spent 10 whole seconds commiserating with Israel in grief and mourning, said, well, you can't do that. You'll cause a humanitarian crisis. And Israel said, just maybe, perhaps, possibly, Hamas should have thought of that before their ambush. Israel commenced revenge immediately, although Netanyahu did allow Palestinians more than a week to take their camel caravans and find another country to despoil. But was that enough for the UN? Was that sufficient for world opinion? Of course not! When an errant Arab bomb fell on a Gaza hospital, who got blamed? Who do you think? Meanwhile, Hamas fighters are using hospitals and schools as their command posts. They know that if Israel attacks, liberals weep, and if Israel doesn't attack, Jews die. Win-win! Well, you know what? Oxfam and World Health and Red Cross and Doctors Without Brains, sometimes Jews have to kill the people who make them die. But do college kids understand that? These Ivy League, Bush League, moss-covered troglodytes who glom onto any cause as long as it makes them feel like they're saving the world from their parents' mistakes while they live in their parents' basements. Like toadstools blossoming out of excrement, pro-Palestinian protests are everywhere, stopping traffic, blocking libraries, frustrating commuters, and doing nothing except proving just how many anti-Semites there really are. Oh, but we don't hate Jews, says Ilhan and Rashida and Alexandria and Susan and Roger and, oh, in for a penny, Ice Cube and Kanye. We just hate colonialist Israel, forgetting that Hebrews have lived in Israel since forever and that Jews ask for no other safe place in the universe apart from this tiny country. In my stage show, Shalom Dammit, I made a joke about Jews for Jesus, saying that the term is an oxymoron, like vegetarians for brisket. Believe it or not, something even more incomprehensible has emerged. Queers for Palestine. I'm not kidding. Queers for Palestine. These are a passel of LGBT bags promoting the very people who would cut their schwanzes off for being who they are. You know, earlier this year, Out Traveler magazine picked the 15 best cities in the world for gay people. Coming in 8th, 2 slots ahead of Miami, Tel Aviv. You know how many other places in the Middle East made the list? If the list was the best 200, you know how many Middle Eastern cities would be on it? A handful, and they would be in Israel too. And yet, queers for Palestine. How can these foolish freaks have their heads so far up their own tuchuses? Well, likely they've been trying that as a sex technique, but seriously, what's next for them? Faggots for AIDS? In that case, I donate. And I wish AIDS, leprosy, and spina bifida on anyone who chants, "From the river to the sea, Palestine will be free." No way. From the sea to the river, IDF will make Hamas quiver. From the sand to mud, Gaza will run with terrorist blood. From Jerusalem to Miami, we will slice our enemies like pastrami. Okay, enough rage. Now it's time for sadness. As I often do with these annum-ending reflections, I'd like to honor poetically some of the notables who did not make it out of 2023 alive. We start with Norman Lear of All in the Family and Maude, and Richard Roundtree, who's now giving the shaft to God. To Tina Turner, we said goodbye. Her talent was river deep and mountain high. Farewell, Tony Bennett, who left his heart in San Fran, and cartoonist Al Jaffe, who was a true madman. Ted Kaczynski died, and he was the bomb. Henry Kissinger gave us the director's cut of Vietnam. As first ladies go, Roz Carter seemed nice. And sadly, Bob Barker has barked his last price. We lost Tim McCarver, so pleasant and plucky, and David McCallum from Uncle, our Ducky. We lost Michael Gambon, Glenda Jackson too, and Rolf Harris tied down his last kangaroo. Farewell, Alan Arkin of movies and theater. Bye, Raquel Welch and Suzanne Summers, both jiggling for St. Peter. We toast Shane McGowan with joy and affection, and director Bill Friedkin, who made a connection. Jimmy Buffett's margaritas became a huge trend, while booze and drugs took Matthew Perry, our friend. We lost Pat Robertson, who thought he was holy, and Dame Edna tossed her last gladioli. Andre Brower and Lance Reddick were marvelous cops. Richard Belzer was dean of the microphone drops. Farewell to Jeff Beck. Bye-bye, Tom Verlaine. No more will Burt Bacharach write about rain. The princely Treat Williams is now in an urn. Farewell, Cindy Williams, who's up with Laverne. Sandra Day O'Connor has judged her last case, while Sinead O'Connor has reached a better place. We lost Adam Rich of 8 is Enough, and Marty Croft, Pajandrum of HR Puffinstuff. Gordon Lightfoot made his way down with the sun. And farewell to Tom Jones, no, the off-Broadway one. Bon voyage, Belafonte, a king among men. And ciao, David Crosby, the C of SN. Robbie Robertson's up with the Hawks in a band, and let's all give Pee Wee Herman a hand. We buried Pat Cooper and laid Tommy Smothers to rest. The truth is, Tom and Dick, Mom liked you both best. We mourned Jerry Springer, who sent chairs flying, and all the good people who are sick, dead, or dying. But enough lamentation. I don't want to bore. Let's pray for survival in 2024. This has been a Rabbinical Reflection from Rabbi Sol Solomon, Temple Sons of Bitches in Great Neck, New York. Happy Jew Year!